Because now Gavin is mad that they nationalized the California Guard. Trump has that ability. And people said, no, no president. They have to request it. No, they don't. You think that JFK said to George Wallace, when he nationalized the Alabama National Guard, said, would you please let us nationalize your guard so you can be removed from stopping African American people going to the University of Alabama? No. Start here, all right. Folks, here's the deal. We're diving deep into a heated exchange where Victor Davis Hanson takes no prisoners as he goes toe-to-toe with Jessica Tarlov on Fox News.
Newsom there in that interview said the downward spiral started in LA when the military arrived. Is that when it happened, or was it when protesters were hurling rocks at cops?
This is very small and isolated, and Donald Trump is doing what Donald Trump does best, and he's playing the same footage. He has that image, right, of that topless protester with the Mexican flag on top of a burning Waymo car, and it's terrible, and that guy should be prosecuted. You should not be able to do that, but that doesn't mean that in general that's what's going on here. So Gavin Newsom is speaking for a majority of Americans. Right before we came on air, there was a new Quinnipiac poll that was released. So Donald Trump, -12 on approval in general, -11 on immigration, and -16 on deportations. He has taken his best issue and decimated it. And now Americans and illegals, who, yes, they're here illegally, are living in fear of what the government is trying to do.
There's millions of dollars in damage. A lot of businesses got ransacked, and illegals should be a little scared. He broke into the country. A lot of them have committed crimes. I'd like them to be a little fearful, Jessica. Gavin Newsom's emasculated. Trump reached into his state, took his guard, and used it to protect the people that Gavin either couldn't or wouldn't do. Attacking democracy is not enforcing the law. All they're doing here is enforcing the law. And they can't even get their story straight. All right, first there was no riot, then there was a riot, then it was peaceful, then it was mostly peaceful, then Trump provoked the violence. So the National Guard provoked the riots? Because I didn't see a single National Guardsman melt down a Waymo or loot a store. Not one. You can't be held hostage in your own country by foreigners, because that's what this is. It's an extortion attempt. Every time you try to enforce the law, we're going to burn stuff. That's not how it works. Gavin thinks it's good politics to let your own city burn down. That's good politics. That's the
This all centers around Trump's controversial use of government powers, sparking a fiery debate about how we handle immigration, law enforcement, and public order. Tarlov's perspective? Well, she painted Trump as crossing the line into authoritarianism. But Hanson, he wasn't having it. He called out the hypocrisy of portraying chaos as mere demonstrations of democracy. And here's the kicker. This isn't just another political clash. It's a reflection of national division, highlighting how law enforcement and public sentiment intersect. So, let me ask. Curious to see how this plays out. Hold on a sec. Mind if I ask a small favor? If you're into content that breaks the mold and keeps it 100% real, consider hitting that subscribe button. No pressure. I'll be right here when you get back. Already did. You're a real one. Welcome to the crew. Now, let's dive back in. Introduction to debate, all right. So let's get into the thick of it, shall we? On one side, we've got Jessica Tarlov presenting her case against Trump, zeroing in on his approach to immigration and law enforcement. She argues, maybe not too convincingly, using polls and public sentiment that Trump has overreached, even going as far as calling his moves downright authoritarian. But here's where it gets spicy. Enter Victor Davis Hanson. Hanson dismantles Tarlov. Hanson doesn't just poke holes in Tarlov's narrative. He practically dismantles it, brick by brick. He goes straight for the jugular, focusing on the so-called authoritarian use of the National Guard. Hanson argues that enforcing existing laws isn't oppression, it's standing against chaos. People like Tarlov might see the street unrest as an expression of democracy, but Hanson flips the script by saying this so-called democracy in action is anything but. It's mobs shutting down cities. He draws a parallel to those historical moments when leaders had to step in decisively. Remember JFK and George Wallace in Alabama? Hanson points out that sometimes action is necessary to maintain order and protect the citizens. Critique of polls. Tarlov, meanwhile, throws a lot of weight behind a particular poll suggesting that Trump's approval ratings are tanking due to his immigration policies. But Hanson doesn't let that slide. He critiques how these polls are often skewed, claiming they oversample certain demographics, hinting at manipulation to sway public opinion. According to Hanson, these numbers may not be as reliable as Tarlov would like us to believe. Now, let's dig into the narrative Tarlov's trying to push. She's framing these protests as a reaction to Trump's hardline policies. In her view, when the National Guard steps in, it only escalates tensions. But here's where we see Hanson call her out. By painting Trump as the villain for using the National Guard, Hanson suggests she's missing the bigger picture, that these steps are about safety and restoring order when local governments are overwhelmed or unwilling to act. Protests or invasion. And there's more. Hanson's rebuttal extends to point out that when people are attacking police and destroying property while waving foreign flags, it's hard to call that peaceful protest. Instead, he suggests, this looks more like an invasion than asylum seeking. It's a bold statement, sure, but it's one that's meant to provoke thought. He underscores the fact by laying out the stark numbers. Millions crossing the border illegally and only a few being deported daily. The whole argument is punctuated by Hanson's critique of politicians like Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, pointing out how their positions might be ruining their future chances on the national stage.
But here's what's interesting. The mayor, Karen Bass, came down in her public comments on the side of the protesters who were protesting the idea of deportation at all, kind of like Kamala Harris used to march against deportation. And Gavin Newsom then gave a series of editorializations that I think have ruined his chances ever to be a serious national candidate. He said this was chaotic, this was reckless, and he said that they were just trying to have an arbitrary deportation quota. Gavin, 12 million people came into the country illegally. That was 3 million a year. That was 250,000 per month. That was over 8,000 a day. They have not been able to deport more than 1,000 on most days, sometimes 500. They would have to deport 8,000 people every single day for 4 years to get back where we were with 20 million illegal aliens when Joe Biden entered office. So it's not a quota, it's an effort to stop an invasion. What I'm getting at is, on one side of these violent acts, you have these protesters. And I'll just give a word of advice. You're going to lose the optics Democrats, left, and immigration protesters if you have a lot of people here illegally and they're waving the American, not the American flag, but the Mexican flag as they're committing acts of violence. Think of the logic. I am waving the flag of the country under no circumstances I want to return, but I am attacking the officers and the infrastructure of the country that under every circumstance I want to stay in. That might explain why in the midst of all of this negative publicity, a CBS poll taken to show that people were outraged showed that just the opposite. 54% of the American people are for continued deportation.
Calling out the chaos and dismissing these issues as mere politics, according to Hanson, does a disservice to those who are dealing with the consequences on the ground. Public support for deportations, and let's not forget the CBS poll Hanson cites, which suggests that contrary to Tarlov's claims, a majority of Americans actually support continued deportations. It's these contrasting viewpoints on the same piece of data that highlight the divide in public perception. Hanson makes an effort to show that despite the media's narrative, many people still stand by strict border policies. So, as these two clash on national television, the real question for viewers is this: who's really addressing the core of the issue, and who's simply spinning the story? Are the polls and public opinions really shifting, or are they being massaged to fit a narrative? There's one thing for sure, Hanson isn't just defending Trump. He's challenging how the story's being told, how the facts are presented, and who gets to interpret them. Meanwhile, Tarlov stands with her own interpretations, painting a picture of public discontent against an iron fist approach. It's a classic battle of perspectives, each side as determined and vocal as the other. So, where do you stand on this? Is Hanson right about the need for strong measures? Or does Tarlov have a point about authoritarian overreach? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm really curious to hear your perspective on this. It's these sorts of debates and discussions that keep things lively, don't you think?